Welcome to Miss Rowe Classroom. Earlier we completed the first 4 chapters of Class 12 Prose. Today we will review the first poem from the syllabus, My Mother at 66 by Kamla Das. Let's start with the author. Kamla Das was a prominent Indian English poet and Malayalam author. Renowned for her bold and confessional style of poetry, her poems explore themes of love, identity, and womanhood. My Mother at 66 was included in the Best of Kamla Das collection published in 1991. Returning to the poem, let's begin with the summarization. In this poem, the poet describes a car journey with her aging mother. She observes her mother's frail and pale appearance and feels a deep sorrow and fear of losing her. To distract herself, she looks outside at the lively surroundings. Despite her inner turmoil, Kamla Das hides her feelings from her mother, offering only a smile and a hopeful farewell. The poem captures the universal fear of losing a parent and the complex emotions of witnessing their aging. Let's move to the line-by-line explanation of the poem. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me. The explanation is very simple. The poet starts by describing a recent Friday morning car journey from her parents' house to the city of Cochin. The poet notices her mother sitting next to her in the car. Next 2 lines, doors, open mouth, her face ashen like that of a corpse. Her mother is asleep with her mouth open. Her face looks pale and grey, similar to a dead body. Next 4 lines, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. The poet Kamla Das realizes that her mother looks old and fragile. She tries to stop thinking about her mother's aging and the pain it causes her. Kamla Das focuses on the scenery outside, where young trees seem to run past as the car moves. She sees happy children playing and running out of their houses. Next 2 lines, but after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale as a late winter's moon. After going through the security check at the airport, she stands a short distance from her mother. Kamla Das, the poet, looks at her mother again and notices she looks tired and pale, like the moon on a winter night. I'll explain the symbolism behind the simile later in the video. Concluding lines, and felt that odd familiar ache, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, see you soon, Amma. All I did was smile and smile and smile. Kamla Das feels a deep familiar sadness and fear from her childhood, probably the fear of losing her mother. Despite her feelings, she simply says, see you soon to her mother. She tries to hide her worries and sadness by smiling continuously at her mother. Let's shift to the analysis of the poem. First, the emotional conflict of the poet. A. Realization and pain. The poet experiences a sudden painful realization of her mother's age and vulnerability. B. Distraction and denial. She tries to distract herself by observing the lively scenes outside, attempting to push away the troubling thoughts about her mother's mortality. C. Acceptance and concealment. At the airport, the poet confronts her feelings again, feeling the old familiar ache of her childhood fear of separation. Despite this, she masks or conceals her fear with a smile and a hopeful farewell. See you soon, Amma. Second, the tone of the poem. The Tone of My Mother at 66 by Kamla Das is reflective and melancholic. The poem starts with the poet's introspective thoughts as she drives with her mother. The poet reflects on her mother's aging and the associated sorrow and fear. There is a pervasive sense of sadness throughout the poem. The description of mother's face as ashen like that of a corpse and pale as a late winter's moon conveys a deep sadness. The poet's realization of her mother's frailty and the inevitable approach to death brings a severe tone to the poem. Third type of the poem. My Mother at 66 is free verse and embodies the confessional style of poetry through its personal subject matter, emotional intensity, first-person narrative, reflective nature, and the revelation of private experiences. How? Let's study through following points. The poem reflects on intimate feelings about the mother's aging and the fear of losing her. It conveys intense emotions like sorrow, fear, and tenderness candidly. It's written in the first person, providing direct insight into the poet's thoughts and feelings. The poem engages in deep introspection, reflecting on fears and the passage of time. The poem reveals the poet's private experiences of driving with her mother and dealing with fear of loss, which is common in confessional works. Fourth, structure and language. The poem is written in a single unbroken stanza, reflecting the continuous flow of the poet's thoughts and emotions. The language is simple yet evocative, with powerful similes and metaphors that vividly convey the poet's emotional state. Fifth, theme of the poem. The poem's central theme is the inevitable aging and the fear of losing a parent. The mood is melancholic, filled with deep sorrow and an underlying fear of mortality. The poem vividly portrays the physical signs of aging in the poet's mother, symbolizing the inevitable passage of time and the approach to mortality. The mother's ashen face and comparison to a late winter's moon highlight her frailty and the inevitability of aging. Next running theme in the poem is fear of losing a parent. The poet expresses a deep-seated fear of losing a mother, a fear rooted in childhood and still present in adulthood. The phrase familiar ache highlights the continuing nature of this fear. Third, cycle of life. The contrast between the aging mother and the vibrant sprinting young trees and merry children emphasizes the natural cycle of life. While the mother represents the twilight years, the external scenery symbolizes youth and continuity. Sixth point in our analysis is imagery and symbolism. First, the mother's face. The mother's face is described as ashen like that of a corpse, symbolizing the poet's realization of her mother's frailty and approaching old age. Second, young trees and merry children. The vibrant imagery of young trees sprinting and children spilling out of their homes contrasts sharply with the mother's stillness and aging. This contrast highlights the life cycle and the poet's attempt to distract herself from her painful thoughts. Third, late winter's moon. The mother's face is compared to a late winter's moon, suggesting pallor, lifelessness, and a distant beauty. At the end of its cycle, the winter moon symbolizes the end stage of life. Now, an important question. What is the relevance behind the repetition of the word smile and ellipsis at the end of the poem? The repeated use of the word smile indicates the poet's attempt to mask her true feelings of sadness and fear from her mother. Smiling acts as a facade to hide her inner turmoil or pain. By smiling, the poet tries to reassure her mother, providing comfort and projecting a sense of normalcy and calmness despite her emotional distress. The repetition also highlights the contrast between the outward expression and the inward feelings. While she smiles, her internal experience is one of sorrow and anxiety about her mother's health and aging. Smiling becomes a coping mechanism for the poet. It helps her manage the overwhelming emotions she feels at the thought of her mother's frailty and the prospect of separation. The repeated smile at the poem's end emphasizes the difficulty of parting. It reflects her struggle to maintain composure and optimism as she bids farewell, probably her final farewell to her mother in person. Moving to the ellipses using at the end of the poem, there can be three probable or possible interpretations. First, reflective pause. The ellipses create a moment of reflective pause, allowing the reader to dwell on the significance of the poet's final smile and the intricacies of the mother-daughter relationship portrayed in the poem. Second, continuation of emotions. They imply that the poet's emotions and inner turmoil persist beyond the poem's end, indicating that her feelings of sadness, fear, and love for her mother are ongoing and unresolved. Third, open-ended closure and interpretation. They introduce ambiguity, uncertainty into the poem's conclusion, leaving room for interpretation and allowing readers to project their thoughts and feelings onto the text. To conclude, the poem touches on a universal experience, the fear of losing a parent. It resonates with anyone who has observed the aging of a loved one and felt the accompanying fear and sorrow. This ends the explanation of the poem My Mother at 66 by Kamla Das. If you are looking for Class 12's English chapter or poem summaries, themes, vocabulary, MCQs, important passages, and question answers, including extract-based questions, please visit our website www.missroclassroom.com. Stay tuned, we'll meet again to discuss Pablo Neruda's poem Keeping Quiet. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, comment, and share the video. Bye-bye.